Hi. Can
It works. Okay, great.
you hear me well?
I guess we'll give it maybe just another 30 seconds just to have people see that we're on,
Okay.
and we can go from there.
Is my audio good?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Can you see
Okay.
and hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you perfect.
Awesome. Okay. Great. Okay, so there's a lot of people signing on. Okay, so let's get started. Introduce myself, and then I'll hand it over to you to introduce yourself and kind of how this came to be from your end. So my name's Dr. Jamie Zuckerman. I'm a clinical psychologist outside of Philadelphia. I work primarily with adults experiencing anxiety, depression, toxic relationships with significant others or within their family, and have a small specialty in health psychology where I help people who have physical illnesses learn to adjust to living with them and the interplay between that and psychological symptoms. So I'll hand it over to you and kind of introduce you and how this came to be and go from there.
So I'm Shiki. I'm a Twitch streamer. I play a variety of games, and I was talking to Erin, which is co-owner of Exit, and she introduced me to just a group of wonderful ladies, and we were talking about mental health awareness and how I wanted to spread more mental health awareness and from my experiences, and then that led me to leave to the beautiful Dr. Jamie. So
yeah. Okay, so we're going to go through a bunch of questions for about 15-20 minutes. They're pretty general, they're very relevant, especially what's going on now and kind of COVID and being inside and not really socializing as much anymore. There's a ton of anxiety and just heightened emotions in general. So we'll start with anxiety and social media. And we could talk about this for days and days and days. So I'll kind of highlight the main points and then want to turn it over to you to kind of get your experiences and kind of what people are saying to you and things that you hear within your community. So anxiety in social media is not a new concept, right? It's something that is very obvious. And what I say with anything is that it's always good to look for a balance. And I think it's very irresponsible to think that it's this all or nothing thing, right? That you should just get off social media or be anxious. And it just doesn't work like that. And in today's world, it doesn't really make sense to take a total cleanse is one thing, but to completely remove yourself from social media, it will affect your job, right? It will affect your relationships. So it's not, it doesn't really make sense to be able to do that. So as far as anxiety and social media, some of the things that are major contributors to the anxiety is first social comparison, right? People who are routinely comparing their lives to what they see, let's say on Instagram or Facebook. And what we know from this is that, you know, let's take Instagram, for example. Instagram is one picture, maybe a video. And I always say this, the probability of somebody having taken a selfie or taken a picture and posted that very first one with no filtering, no cropping, no editing is slim to none. I don't do it. I can't imagine that most people would do it. We'd have, you know, 10 chins and, you know, our eyes are half closed and, you know, we're pale. We don't look good. So everything you're seeing on social media has been filtered, literally. And here we are kind of in the pandemic. We haven't really spoken to anybody and we're anxious. And we see these things on social media and we feel bad about ourselves. You know, I don't think I changed out of my pajamas for probably 4 months during the pandemic. Maybe I showered, washed my hair, put on makeup. I looked horrible. And I would see these, you know, influencers and people on social media posting these pictures of, you know, they took up the piano and they're fully dressed in makeup and jewelry. And I'm sitting here going, I'm lucky if I can get out and, you know, comb my hair. So it's very important to keep that in mind. And also this idea of missing out on things. It gives the impression, obviously, that people are doing things and people are engaged. Again, when really what it is a snapshot. You don't know the rest of their life. You know a millisecond. And so it's important to keep that in mind too. So I want to kind of get your experience on this. I could talk about this all day, but I want to get your experience with social media and what you hear from your friends in your community.
So the one thing that I noticed the most is, especially from like, because I stream like all the time, like I just don't stop streaming, is a lot of people were comparing themselves to other streamers. So they felt like, oh, this streamer has done X, Y, and Z through the pandemic. Like I should be able to do this too. You know, I should, you know, have hundreds of viewers watching me. I should, you know, they found a way to go outside safely and record content. I should be able to do that too. And then a lot of people are putting themselves down with that anxiety, feeling like I should be doing. It's not like they want to, they feel like they should because they're missing out. But the reality is like that is not going to work for everyone. Whatever one person's doing, you kind of have to find something that works for you.
Yes.
And I think the pandemic happened, everybody was like going through the same thing, but everybody showed only portions of it. They didn't show, you know, them in pajamas all the time. Like I was in pajamas majority of the time too. The only time I would, you know, put makeup on was when I would turn on my stream. So it'd be I would feel very drained and very exhausted, you know, because I would always compare myself to other streamers and other people, you know, oh, they're taking time out of their day to do their hair. Like just do what you feel comfortable doing. You know, everyone is, you know, experiencing the pandemic and is coping with it a certain way. If they want to pick up a new hobby, like, you know, learning new makeup or an instrument, that's what works for them. Not everybody, you know.
So I'll actually speak to that because I did a whole thing on this. And for those of you that are watching that follow me, you know that I feel very strongly about this. One of the things that I noticed during the pandemic was that people were exactly like you said, doing things like brand new hobbies that they had never done before. And putting this on Instagram. And again, I'm sitting here like maybe I did a puzzle with my son. That was about the extent of it. And I said, you know, this is really going to make people feel like crap. And people initially looked or had this perception that this was like a long snow day. And it's, you know, it wasn't a snow day. It wasn't a vacation. It was a forced mandated lockdown that we didn't expect and didn't know was coming. So all these people are saying, you know, oh, this is time to better yourself. And I had a lot of issues with that because it gives the impression that how you are right now at the moment in the middle of a pandemic is not good enough. And people were saying you should take up piano, you should take up, you know, something new. Let's say you've never done makeup before in your life and now you want to do it. Here's the problem with that. Why on earth would you pick one of the most anxiety-provoking times, hopefully, in our lives to pick up something that has a significant learning curve when your brain is already consumed with anxiety and worry? You have no attentional resources to put to this new task. And what's going to happen is you're going to pick up this new task that you've never tried to do before, and you're not going to do it well. And then that's going to make you feel even crappier. So what I was telling people during the pandemic is if you never played the piano before the pandemic, this is not the time to pick it up now. However, if let's say you already play an instrument and you wanted to pick up a different instrument, that's something else. So I was telling people to stick with their hobbies and do a variation on them. So if you love cooking, try different recipes instead of you never cook and now you're going to take it. It didn't make any sense. It wasn't a welcomed break. It was a lockdown. We were anxious. So I agree with you completely on that. So, all right, I'm going to switch to the next topic because we have a bunch and I want to make sure we get to most of them. Okay, so mental health and gaming. This was something that you really wanted to touch on because it's something that, you know, you see a lot in your community and things, and people will send you questions and ask you for your advice. So do you want to kind of give a little bit of an overview of your own experiences with this and experiences of other people that you've come in contact with?
No, yeah. So I think one of the main things was this one experience. as like, you know, as a streamer, you know, you meet a lot of people, and my boyfriend is a professional Call of Duty player. So, you know, me going to, you know, events with him, tournaments with him, you know, that took, it wasn't taking a toll on me in a sense of like, oh, like a lot of people were coming up to me asking me questions. Like I handled that well. It was just when we were traveling and meeting different types of people, not everyone's gonna have the same reaction. So I had to learn how to adapt and how to kind of just like like in my own brain just tell myself to like focus on why I was here, which was, you know, to travel, to see the event, make connections. And this one particular experience that I had was we went to London, and I've never been outside of the US, so we went to London for a tournament. And you know, they're very into their own like football chants, and they were incorporating it with Call of Duty, which was awesome. They were incorporating with esports, but you know, they're very passionate with, you know, specific teams. It's like very specific teams. So when my boyfriend's team ended up beating one of their own teams that they were very supportive of, you know, all the chants were really bad. Like they were throwing water bottles at the casters. They were like chants that were very inappropriate. They were even chanting about me. Like the whole stadium was just chanting, saying like I'm nothing. I am just this person's like, I'm not even his significant other. Like I'm just someone he just like started, you know, talking to, whatever. I'm not gonna say those actual terms because, you know, it's a little immature, but you know, they made like just seeing that whole, like it was a stadium almost. It was a whole stadium just chanting at me, pointing at me. I was like, what do I do? You know, like I didn't know what to do, but like the one thing that like
That's really
I've always,
terrible.
yeah,
That's overwhelmingly terrible. I'm sorry.
I didn't know what to do. I think like, you know, because I've talked to like, you know, like my own friends and, you know, my own therapist, and she's like when you are in those moments, it's either fight, flight, or freeze.
That's
And I
right.
was like, a part of me wanted to just yell back and be like, you don't know me, like, you know, all these things. But then like I felt like a little girl inside was just like just frozen, you know, and I couldn't really like, you know, flight. I couldn't leave because it just would make things worse. So the best thing I did was just like told myself to breathe in that moment. It wasn't a matter of like 10 seconds. I just
Yeah.
told myself to breathe, and I was like, I'm here to support my boyfriend. I'm here to make connections for myself. I just like remind myself like why I was here.
Yeah.
And point of the story is I feel like a lot of people don't do that enough, is like everyone gets overwhelmed even just by meeting people. My experience was obviously more on the negative side, but you know, when people come up to you asking questions and trying to get to know you, and you know, you're going to feel overwhelmed in those moments, the best thing you can do for yourself is just remind yourself why you're doing this and why you're there, like you're
Yeah.
there. And I think for me it took a lot of like just to be very present in that moment. It took like
Yeah.
all of my willpower to just be like present and just be like, I'm here to be supportive and to focus. And I literally just sat back down in my chair and I just ignored it. And it kept going for like 10 minutes. I just ignored it. And then eventually at the last day of the tournament, my boyfriend's team ended up winning. And the same people that were sitting behind me throwing those heavy cardboard signs on my neck, I had bruises in my neck. They were throwing like a bunch of stuff at me. You know, they're the same people that came up to my boyfriend and I asked me for a picture. And I was like, no, like
Good for
you
you.
were really rude. Like, no, just walked away. But it taught me a lot, like, because I'm always like wanting to like defend myself and, you know, talking back and all these, but it took a lot for me to be like, there's some moments where you need to stay quiet, and like actions will speak louder than words. It's just like a basic thing that, you know, your parents teach you and teachers teach you like growing up. And it's like one of those moments that was very like humbling to me, that's like I don't need to fight every battle. I don't need to fight back every time. The best thing I can do for myself is just stay quiet, let it die down, and then something else will take over. And the fact that my boyfriend's team ended up winning and those people just completely changed their reaction was just like, wow, there's just, you know, we're all human at the end of the day. Like half the things that we do we'll eventually learn from. And I think that was one of the main things, was it can go either really well or really bad, but the best thing to do is just remind yourself why you're doing something and what you enjoy about it and everything. So I think that was the main experience that humbled me in a way, kind of, and also just opened my eyes to like always be willing to adapt, kind of thing. So that was one main experience.
Yeah, I mean that's a tough one. And one of the things that you said repeatedly, which is something I always tell my patients, is that when you're in a situation that's anxiety provoking or bringing up thoughts you don't want to have and feelings you don't want to have, people think that if you in the moment try to get rid of them or avoid them or not think about it or even distract yourself, that that's going to take them away. And it may temporarily, but really what it's doing is it's just making it louder and bigger. You were in a situation where you could have left, right? You could have fought back, or you could have. What you actually did was exactly what I would tell you to do, and at the same time know that it's brutally uncomfortable. But what you did was you focused on the function of your behavior, and I say that a lot with my patients, meaning why you're there, and the actual reason for your behavior of being there, which is to support your boyfriend.
Mhm.
And if you think about it from a value standpoint, supporting your boyfriend is something that you value. Is your
Yeah.
behavior of running out supportive of that, in line with that? No, it's not. It would
Yeah.
take you that way, which would create more anxiety. So staying and being in the moment and staying there was something that you value, and that's the behavior that you chose to do.
Yeah.
And with that comes sitting with your discomfort and sitting with your anxiety, which is exactly what you did. And you describe what is being present focused, being mindful of your breathing, mindful of the reason why you're there, mindful of your surroundings, even if they're uncomfortable. And it sounds like your breathing kind of really forced you to stay grounded and stay present. And above all else, showed you that you are fully capable, even though it's uncomfortable, to sit through something like that. Had you
Yeah.
left, you wouldn't have had that opportunity to see that you can handle it. And as far as other people, obviously, we can't control what other people do. We can't control
Yeah.
their thoughts. We can't control their feelings, but we can control how we choose to respond to them. And your response to them threw them off balance. I guarantee it, because they probably expected you to get upset, cry, leave, fight back. You did none of those. So you
Yeah.
probably threw them for a loop, which would eventually reduce their behaviors, which they came up to you and asked for a picture.
Yeah.
So, I think you handled a really, really horrible situation beautifully. Again, even though it was difficult. So, do you want to, before we kind of switch to, I think we have enough time to do this, we'll do one more topic, but do you want to kind of maybe talk about something that you hear from a lot of other people, their experiences, or kind of a general theme in mental health and gaming that you think would be helpful?
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. I think, for example, like with my experience, I feel like a lot of people don't talk enough about it, or, talk about it like on stream, or talk about it, publicly. And I think that's the main thing is like, usually, we learn how to tolerate people, like, saying bad stuff about us through a screen. Like, if I'm streaming and I see my chat and someone comes in saying, you're this and that, or something very, very like sexist to me, I'm just like, oh, delete the message. And I think like, everyone has learned how to tolerate that. But the one thing that I've always heard from other people is like, it's always in person, in real life experiences. So besides my experience, the one experience I heard, I forgot from which streamer, but she was a female, and she had told me that she went to a TwitchCon. And basically it was just, a weekend where everyone from, on the Twitch platform meets up, all these things. And TwitchCon usually has a partner party, and it's only like for partners, and if you're verified on Twitch, you can go in, you have a specific badge. Usually, like, security is good. This is before I went to my first TwitchCon. It was years ago. But from the story she told me is that she had another friend, another streamer, who went to the party, and she was, networking, talking to girls and guys, etc., etc. And she realized that there was something in her drink, and her drink was like fizzing, and it was like, I forgot what she said. I think she noticed like the way it was fizzing. It wasn't like a spray in the drink that they handed out. She knew that she left her cup somewhere, and she went back to pick it up, and it was fizzing. And she was, and the friend that's telling me the story, I asked her, like, did you see it, et cetera, et cetera. And she goes, I told her that where she last sat, there was two girls there, and they were by the drink. I didn't see them do it, but that's the last two people I saw. And her friend was mind blown. She was like, you hear stories about a male and a female, some, interaction, but it was two females doing it to another female. and she potentially could have been harmed. She could have passed out. I don't know what was in the drink. She doesn't know what was in the drink, but she was very, very scared. And the friend had told me, next, because I was planning on going on TwitchCon. So she said, next time you go to TwitchCon or whenever you're planning on it, do not have your drink out in the open, et cetera, et cetera. And apparently the girl, her friend, knew those two girls that she was sitting with. Like, she's like, oh, it was those two girls? They would never do that to me. And my friend told her, like, you can't expect people just because they're nice behind a screen and you've played video games with them, networked them, in real life is different. And she's like, she was crying. She's like, why would they do this to me? And my friend told her, like, you have to understand, like, it's a whole competition. Everyone's comparing each other out there. They're either gonna stay quiet and be nice about it and be nice to you and say, congratulations, and they might feel a little bit envious to you, or they will act on that. So that opened my eyes a lot, that no matter how big you are as a streamer or well known you are in general in social media, that when you meet someone in real life, you can't expect that they have the best interest at heart. They're not, your best friend. It's just purely networking and business. I had to say that, but it's you have to assume that rather than be naive. You have to assume to always be cautious, and don't leave your drink around. And it was a partner party. It wasn't like at a bar. It wasn't anything crazy. This was like in a Twitch, like in the building. Like, there was security, everything, but you never know. Somebody could be clever enough to find something and sneak it in. And I think that opened my eyes a lot. And I've heard a lot more stories with parties at TwitchCon, Airbnbs, whatever, that there's always some person that you least expect. And it could be a girl to a girl, a male to a female. You never know who it is. And they will try to do something, like do something with your drink. And it's like the least thing you expect. And that's the one thing that I wish people talked about more, was that, like, stay in groups. And, if you feel like bad vibes from something, like, trust your gut, get another drink. Like, it's better to pay that extra $5 for a drink if you need to than, you get harmed, or, you pass out, or things like that.
I mean, I agree with that. And I see a lot of college students too. And that's something that will come up in conversation. And I couldn't agree with you more about that. And, I think one of the things that is probably feels a little bit weird that you're talking about is there is this, I would say, relationship style that you have with somebody on screen. And there's a safety kind of in that disconnect a little bit. You can go away whenever you want. You can come back whenever you want. You have total control over that. It's a different type of relationship. You have limited access to the person, right? You know only what they let you see. You know only the information that they put out there. And so when you meet somebody in person, that's an entirely different dynamic. You can, the dynamic is different. People hold back more in person, right? It feels a little bit more awkward, especially after the pandemic. I went out the other day and I went to get coffee, and you didn't have to wear a mask in there. And I was sitting in there looking around, and I felt awkward talking to people, just basic conversations. So if you are constantly behind a screen and that's your primary way of interacting with people, when you take that same community and you put that in a totally different social situation, it's going to feel super awkward. You're going to feel kind of out of balance a little bit. You may be relying on social cues and social behaviors that you use, while gaming, that don't apply in actual face-to-face social situations. So it is an adjustment. It's particularly in your field, what you do. I mean, it's a huge adjustment. I feel it only a tiny bit. I was doing virtual therapy because of the pandemic, and I wasn't seeing people in my office. And going back into my office and seeing people face to face, which I've done my entire career, feels so awkward. And that's, my job is I sit face to face with people, real people, across from me every day. So for you, that's probably even more bizarre because your day to day is not face to face with someone. So so it will be very strange for you, and I think it will naturally make you a little bit more hyper vigilant and hyper aware. And especially with experiences like that, I agree with you. You unfortunately have to be a little bit more on guard and take a little bit more precaution and always trust your gut, like you said. And you're right, it's $5. I'd rather you spend $5 than end up in a situation that would be potentially harming and damaging for you.
Yeah.
So I think we can do one more topic very quickly. I'll let you decide. We can talk about coping in PTSD really quickly, or we can talk about family dynamics.
We can do coping with PTSD. I feel like that kind of goes with what we've been
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah. Okay. So I will do this very quickly, but so PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, is an anxiety disorder. And recent past couple of years, it's shifted more towards kind of an adjustment disorder type approach, where people basically, it could be lots of traumatic events over a lifetime, which would be more of kind of this chronic PTSD, or it can be a singular event that causes PTSD. There's medical PTSD. There's a lot of variations on this, but for the sake of time, PTSD develops when somebody experiences some sort of traumatic event, either directly to them or by proxy, which means through somebody else who experienced a traumatic event. If you witnessed a car accident, you weren't the one injured, but nonetheless, you have kind of that anxiety response to it, or somebody you know passes away and it's traumatic for you, and so you kind of take that on. But basically what it is this experience is so disproportionate to what normally happens in your day-to-day that it literally doesn't process properly in your brain. And basically, if you think, here's your brain, it sits right here on the outside of your brain, and it never fully integrates in. And you spend a significant amount of your time avoiding the trauma, avoiding anything that reminds you of it, avoiding anything that triggers you, avoiding anything that brings up emotions that you felt in the trauma, even if it's not the same degree, which it probably wouldn't be. And so in your effort to avoid all these things that remind you of the trauma, you make your world significantly smaller, you make your anxiety bigger, and you make the PTSD louder. And the way you go about treating that is you actually help the person kind of broaden their world very slowly, and you work on kind of processing that trauma into your memory, but have it stored appropriately rather than it being kind of stuck right here and not integrated. People, understandably so, with a trauma try to live as if the trauma isn't affecting them, or live as if they don't want to think about it. The issue becomes is that trauma changes who you are. And so it is absolutely impossible to continue to live and try to ignore it because it's impacted your sense of self. So it actually reduces the symptoms, I'm saying this very generally, reduces the symptoms the more you remain in contact with those feelings, not avoiding them, not dwelling on them, not ruminating about them, but exactly what you did in that situation, sitting with them and noticing them. And that's a whole other conversation. So that's kind of PTSD, my kind of quick and dirty overview of PTSD. If you want to kind of briefly share your experiences or anything that you think is important that people would want to know.
I think this kind of would go with the family dynamics topic, but I think with personally, when I was diagnosed with PTSD, I felt like a lot of things were starting to click, and a lot of things were kind of like I when you mentioned like it kind of sits in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be very honest. I tried for years to just be like, I'm okay, I'm
Absolutely.
fine.
Most people do.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think and for example with that experience I told you about when I was in London, definitely triggered my PTSD with people saying something about me that is not true. It's like accusing and lies and just any type of like lying accusation
where you
thing
don't have control over the information.
yeah. And it just started triggering, you know, from my past. And it took a lot from me to be like, I am present, I am here, let me breathe. And it's very, very hard. And I think, you know, with my job, with being constantly networking and other people and feeling like I can't trust everybody, you know, with the stories that my friend have said, and, you know, with already having, you know, like issues with trust and PTSD with that in the past, it kind of put it in a box for me. My brain just put it in a box where it's
Correct.
like,
It's called compartmentalizing. Yeah.
yeah, you have to
Mm-hmm.
be like super, super hyper aware of everything and just don't let anybody reopen that box. Like,
Yes.
just
Yeah.
there. And I think, you know, going to
And that
events, it kind
drains you.
yeah, I get super
Yeah.
drained.
Yeah.
I would always feel myself very, very like tired and drained. Like my
Yes.
social be like unlimited. I was such a
Right. Yeah.
social,
Yeah.
now it's this.
Yep.
And I
Exactly.
think, you know, with constantly, it's weird. Like I knew that I couldn't let something go. It was just sitting there, and I always knew it. I had stopped going to therapy, and then I recently went back into it. And, you know, because a part of me was like, you know, I'm okay. Like, I'm just gonna forget about it. I don't want to go to
Yep.
therapy and, you know, not talk about it. Like, it's fine. Like, I knew it existed. I wasn't like in denial of that. I knew it exists, but I just didn't want to think about it because I didn't want to
Absolutely.
cry. I didn't want to, you know.
Correct. Because
But
a lot of people think that if they open that box up, that they will cry, not stop crying, fall apart, and never be able to put themselves back together.
I think
And
that,
it's a legitimate fear. I can't blame anyone for feeling that way.
yeah,
They won't fall apart, though. That's the thing, because by acknowledging it and being aware of it, you you actually make that better, because you're making the anxiety better.
yeah,
You're making it less scary because you're showing yourself that you can manage it effectively.
yeah.
I just want to say, somebody had said, what if you start to do things like spending excess money? So I'm going to put drinking excessively, drugs,
Hmm.
things that are very, I want to say, kind of consuming in a sense.
Hmm.
And those are all avoidant behaviors, right? They take you further away from the things that you value. They go in this direction. They make your anxiety bigger. They have consequences, which again add to your anxiety that you already have. But they temporarily get rid of that uncomfortable ickiness that you feel. It temporarily gets rid of the thoughts. The problem with that, again, is that all you're doing is stuffing it into a closet, right? Every time you spend excessive amounts of money or something like that. The problem is that eventually you stuff a closet too much, it's going to start to seep out,
I
right?
remembered that moment that it started doing it, and that's when I was like, I need to go back to therapy.
Yeah.
And it was after the London event, that kind of, it was stuffing the closet like a lot. Like, it was hard to close the closet, you know.
Yes.
And recently with this past year, yeah, because of the pandemic, a lot of, you know, streamers are streaming and a lot of different videos are coming out, and then Among Us came out. And I don't know if you know what Among Us is, but
Mm-hmm.
it's about a game. There's 10 people that play, and it's about it's a lying game. It's a deceiving game. So there's 10 like little bean characters, and then two of the 10 are imposters. So, you know, throughout the game you don't talk at all until you find like a body that's like corrupted or collapsed, whatever, and then you have to see like you have to figure out who's the imposter. It's kind of like a detective game, kind of,
Okay.
but we talk during those meetings when someone finds a body. But that game was definitely what opened the closet for me. It was I started having like anxiety attacks on stream. I started like feeling like very uncomfortable, and I would like tear up. And I had all these opportunities of playing with other big streamers, and I realized like it helped me realize what the trigger was, and it was the constant accusation and deceiving and lying.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it's a game, but my brain didn't register like in those
It won't.
moments.
It'll register it as if it's happening in real life. That's right.
Yeah. So and I had a lot of people in my chat, like a lot of haters, you know, and they came from a lot of bigger streamers. So I had a lot of people watching me, and they'll be like, why are you playing this game if you're getting triggered? Like, and I was just like, because I like playing this game. But in my brain, I was like, this is something that's like an obstacle for me. The
Yeah.
closet is stuffed. I need to push through it. I need to just like battle it. Like, I need to just fight like my own anxiety and just like deal with it. And I dealt with it for 8 months. I was playing the game like 8 hours every day until I got burnt out of the game.
Mhm.
And around that time, around a couple months ago, is when I started therapy again. And I like was talking to my therapist about, the game and stuff. And she had mentioned to me, she goes, not many people would just stick to it. Like a lot of people would
That's
just
right.
fight, flight, or freeze. And she was like, you're 21 and you think like way beyond your
Yeah.
years. Like, and I described to her, I feel like there's two sides of me almost.
Yeah.
And she goes, one side of you is hyper aware,
That's
and one
right.
like this little girl that is like you're still
That's
yourself.
right.
You're still she just doesn't come out much because the hyper awareness is always like who's lying, who's saying this.
Correct.
So I
It's almost
myself,
like an open wound. You know how if air touches it,
yeah,
if it's not scabbed over, it hurts so much
yeah,
more. That's exactly
yeah,
what that is. And and we'll end on this, but I just want to say that that hyper awareness that people have if there's trauma, it
mm-hmm.
makes it really difficult sometimes to know if you're overthinking, overanalyzing, if you're reading into things too much, and it becomes very confusing for the person because they don't know when to turn it on and when to turn it off, and sometimes they can't, and they'll believe their perception of a situation when sometimes it's not accurate. But that hypervigilance, that hyper awareness is there almost as a survival of protective mechanism to 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 make sure that you are aware of the world around you at all times, because you experience something that put you in a situation where you didn't feel equipped to handle danger. So your body is constantly on high alert. And the reason why you're on high alert is because the trauma was never processed. So your brain and body still think it's in danger. And so it's kind of working really overtime to make sure that you're safe, because your brain has no idea of the difference between the feelings you get watching the video game, feelings you get from an actual situation. So you're absolutely right. And just, at least from where I'm sitting, having, only spoken to you for a little bit, it sounds to me like you not only have a very good therapist, but it sounds like you really understands the concept of staying present, sitting with emotions, not running from them. And really that's not only the hardest part, but it's the most necessary.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for everyone that my light, I couldn't figure out what it was. My light keeps flickering, so now I see it. So I apologize. But I want to thank you guys for joining in, and I know we could talk about this forever. And thank you for sharing your stories. Do you want to let people know where to find you?
So my Instagram is Shiki XO_, same as Twitter, and then my Twitch is just Shiki. There you go. That's it.
Awesome. And you guys can find mental health information on my Instagram page. It's Dr. Z_psychologist. And I post a lot of things about mental health, anxiety, things like that. So feel free to check that out. And thank you so much. This was great, and we'll have to do it again.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. Okay, take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.